Good Thursday morning, everybody. Thursday, October 23rd. You're listening to Library Talk and everything else here on Vaquero Radio, your station here at UTRGV. My name is DJ and thank you so much for being here with us this Thursday morning. As we go through the semester, as we are rapidly, as you can see, going through the term, if there is anything that we can do for you from the University Library, both the Edinburgh campus and the Brownsville campus, please come by and see us. That's what we're here for. So if you need your research assistance or you need a space to study or you and your group need a place to work or you need posters printed, please come by and see us because the semester is going to end fairly quickly. Next Saturday is already November 1st. By the time we know it, it's the Thanksgiving holiday, then the Christmas holiday, finals, and then we are looking at spring 2026. So things are going to be moving pretty quickly and pretty rapidly. So we finally know what teams are going to be part of the Major League Baseball's World Series for this year, 2025. And it is going to be the Toronto Blue Jays versus the Los Angeles Dodgers starting tomorrow. So I thought about that. I thought, you know what? We've spoken about so many different topics. We've talked about football, we've talked about books, we've talked about all sorts of things. We've had some wonderful guests in the studio, but I've never spoken about baseball. So I think today is fitting as we're beginning to start the World Series tomorrow to look at the history of the World Series, baseball as a whole, and how baseball has evolved, how it continues to evolve, and how it continues to be what looks like a melting pot of different countries, of different players, of different experiences. So let's take a look at that today. We're going to take a look at the World Series, a history of the World Series, and a very tenuous connection to Brownsville and the Rio Grande Valley. So let's see where this conversation takes us. I'm so excited that you're here, so excited that you're going to be a part of it, and let's see if we can knock it out of the park. There you go. A reference from baseball for you. You're listening to Library Talk and everything else only on Vaquero Radio, the Valley's student station. Thank you so much again, everybody, for joining us for Library Talk and everything else. I'm your host, DJ. If you're joining us after the break, we mentioned that we were going to talk about baseball, but I cannot go without mentioning that those two songs that we just heard, Take On Me and Space Age Love Song, are some of my favorite songs from the 1980s. Hopefully, you enjoyed them as well. So, we're going to be talking about baseball today. But I want to give you a little bit of background as to what the show is about if you're listening for the first time. This is a research based show where we talk about anything and everything, but with a library and research component behind it. So, what I have found, I have gathered from the UTRGV library through its electronic resources and from the internet. So, everything we provide you, everything we talk about, has been referenced, can go back. You can go back, and just use what I gave you and kind of continue a search. And we look at a research question every episode. That research question kind of holds the show together. Whether we answer it or not, it's something that navigates and we use throughout the show so that we can discuss. If we don't cover it, that's fine. We'll maybe take a look at it in another episode. If we do cover it, awesome, but it's something that holds the show together. Before I go into the research question, though, I want to talk a little bit about my experience with baseball. And I'll give you an interesting experience that I had with baseball towards the end of the show and a connection to baseball throughout my life. But I've never played baseball. I have watched baseball, and that's what I want to talk about because we were invited a couple of years ago, 2023, to Colorado. My brother in law is in the military, but at the time was stationed in Colorado. And so he invited us one summer to head up there, and we went to go visit him. And it just so happened at the time we were there, a baseball game between the Colorado Rockies and the Detroit Tigers was going to take place in Denver. So we got all excited. We ended up going. Wonderful, beautiful city. If you've never been to Denver, highly recommend it. It's such a relaxing city. The vibe is great, and the baseball stadium, Coors Stadium, is right downtown. So you get to go through downtown Denver to get to the stadium. So it was just an incredible experience. So we get to the stadium, and we're excited. My family has never watched a baseball game, has never been to a live baseball game. And so we sit down, and it is unseasonably warm, according to my brother in law, and the game starts. and my family doesn't seem too interested in it. Both my brother in law's family and my family. Now, we have been to San Antonio Spurs basketball games. We've been to the Alamo Bowl college football game every year. I've actually gone to see my New Orleans Saints. Not doing very well this year, but I still support the team. But those are my New Orleans Saints. So I've been to football games, we've been to basketball games, but we've never been to a baseball game. So my family wasn't really very enthused about baseball. They kept getting up to go to the concession stand. They kept going to the pro shop. They kept walking around the stadium, but they were not really interested and fascinated as I was about baseball itself. Now, it is a very different sport from basketball where you have this fast break action. It is very different from football where you have this hard hitting action. Baseball's slow, it's methodical. It is something that you just need to sit down and watch. In person, awesome experience. For those of you that enjoy baseball on television, we have our reasons why. I have tried to watch a complete baseball game on television. And again, maybe it's a slow pace, maybe because we're used to the football and the gridiron action, but baseball is slow, it's methodical, it's precise. It's a very elegant sport, and it's the national pastime because we want to just sit there and enjoy everything that comes with baseball. It is slow. It is something that we should just take our time and watch. So if you're looking for hard hitting action, baseball's not the sport for you, but it is a very elegant sport when played by the professionals, when played by people that are experts within this. It is such a beautiful sport. But again, it's very different than what you have based on some of the other faster sports. And so my family was walking around the stadium, and then we ended up leaving. Seventh inning stretch, we took off, and I was really fascinated by it. The Detroit Tigers versus the Colorado Rockies. It was back and forth, back and forth. But then we ended up leaving. And it was great because we got to walk around downtown Denver, and it was a wonderful experience. So today's research question is going to be, how has baseball, particularly the World Series, shaped American culture, their identity, and how has it influenced historical social dynamics from its inception to its present day? There's a long history of a history of baseball, and the reason I mentioned Brownsville and it kind of slipped in was because there is a very tenuous connection to Brownsville and baseball. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But let's take a look at the history of the World Series itself. And this is from the Encyclopedia Britannica, and I'll read this quote to you. It says the National League and American League acted as independent organizations from their founding in the 19th century. The two leagues engaged in what was known as the Baseball War for years prior to the merger, as the Midwest-based American League moved its teams into the established National League domain of the East Coast and wooed away many of the star players from the National League squads. It became a baseball war. The leagues then established a truce in 1903, and that was the result of them coming to terms and deciding on a World Series. And the World Series was going to match the annual winners of each league to determine a national champion. The first team to win the World Series in 1903 was the Boston Americans, and they defeated the Pittsburgh Pirates 5-3 in an 8-game series. 8 games. Now we do 7. So now, starting tomorrow, you'll see a best of 7 games, and that's always been the tradition lately. But back in 1903, when the first World Series, it was a series of 8 games. So now we're down to a series of 7, and that's changed and evolved throughout the years. But when we look at baseball and the American identity within the 20th century, you have this game that has established itself as the national pastime. And it has helped to unify and diversify different populations and different groups. And that is one of the great things about baseball. As we go a little bit and look at the history of baseball, we're going to look at key players that were instrumental in changing the face of baseball. And we talked about the World Series being founded, in 1903, and that event itself became a major tradition and an annual tradition that a lot of people looked forward to. And unlike the Super Bowl, where it's one game, here you have 7 games. And you go back and forth. So you give fans of each team an opportunity to root for their team by going and playing at home. And it's the best of seven. It's a best of 7 series, and it has served as a cultural equalizer with working class and immigrant communities coming together and cheering for their teams. I go back to the Bronzo connection, and I want to mention this because years ago, when I started working at the University of Texas at Brownsville, Texas Southwest College, and this was years ago, back in 1995, 30 years ago, I started working at the library. A neighbor of mine asked me randomly, "Did you know that baseball was invented in Brownsville and at the university?" He came up to me when I started working at the library and he asked me, "Did you know that baseball was invented in Brownsville and at the university?" Not having any idea what he was talking about, not having a context or reference to that question, I had no idea why he was asking me that, no idea why he even brought that up, and no idea what he was talking about. Because that's all he just said. "Did you know that baseball was invented in Brownsville at the university?" So I was curious, but not curious enough, I guess, to look into it at the time. But it always stuck with me, his question about baseball. And then as I worked on my skills of looking for information, walking at the library, and I started enjoying research, I went back to that question. Did you know that baseball was invented in Brownsville at the university? So let me share with you what I found because it's not necessarily a true statement about Brownsville inventing baseball or being played at the university, but there is a little more to it than just that. So I found some articles and I found some information that might shed some light on what he was asking me and why he brought that up about the university inventing baseball and it being invented here. So let me go into a little bit of information. Let me share to you, let me share with you, what I found. That there is no real proof that baseball was invented in Brownsville. But the reason there's a tenuous connection to it is that there was a United States Army officer and Union Major General in the American Civil War that was stationed here in Brownsville. He was stationed here along with future President Zachary Taylor. And they were both stationed at Fort Brown here in Brownsville, and that would eventually become the campus of the University of Texas, Brownsville, and Texas Southwest College. And Texas Southwest College still stands on those grounds. But the Brownsville connection to baseball is this, and I want to read an article I'm going to read an article to you. And this is from Advanced News Journal, Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021, by author René Torres. And the title of this article is Doubleday, Inventor of Baseball, First Comes to Port Isabel and Brownsville. And this is the quote. The origin of baseball in the Valley points to Brownsville, specifically to when the first baseball club was formed in 1868. The inaugural game pitted the Rio Grande Club of Brownsville against Club Union de Matamoros. There is even some history of baseball in this region prior to 1868, and this is all due to the Mexican-American War of 1846. Abner Doubleday, who is credited with inventing the game, was stationed in the valley with Zachary Taylor's U.S. Army War during the Mexican-American War, once in Port Isabel and again at Brownsville's Fort Brown. Some old-timers believe that Doubleday organized the first baseball game in Texas in Port Isabel, of all places, but no written document has been found that verifies such a game was played. It remains pure speculation. The time frame was right, though, since Doubleday was in the Valley 7 years after he supposedly came up with a concept for baseball in 1839. This that I just read is a quote from the article Doubleday, Inventor of Baseball, First Comes to Port Isabel and Brownsville from Advanced News Journal, dated November 3rd, 2021, from author René Torres. So that is why the connection to baseball and Bronzo is made, because Abner Doubleday, who was here in the Valley, is credited with inventing the concept of baseball. Now, again, there's no proof of that. There's no real documentation. But even if you go to Port Isabel, there is a restaurant bar named Doubleday, and there's a picture of Abner Doubleday on the side of the wall there to that restaurant. So the idea that Abner Doubleday invented baseball and then he was here just kind of lends itself to the lore that at some point baseball and Bronzo have a connection. And if you continue looking at the 20th century and the world wars that had happened, World War One, World War Two, and this idea of patriotism, baseball united us and it gave us this morale that we needed on the home front as our citizens were going to fight. And we looked for something good, we looked for something wholesome, and baseball filled that void. And a lot of major players, Ted Williams, Joe DiMaggio, they actually served on the front lines of the war. And it was essential at the time for the public morale during World War II to continue watching baseball. It's a sport that, again, brings different groups of people together: the working class, the upper class, the middle class. Baseball games are not very expensive if you're willing to sit at the very, very top of the stadium, but then they can be very expensive when you want to sit down the third base line. So it is a sport that is accessible to everyone. And we're seeing that in countries throughout the world. We see that in players that are coming from different places from around the world. But if we go back to that reference question and that research question about baseball and the World Series being part of our community and our society and bringing this diversification into the United States and into the culture, then we need to look at the racial integration during the civil rights era. Because we have in 1947 Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier. He was part of the Dodgers Major League Baseball team. But what did this mean? What did it mean to have Jackie Robinson join Major League Baseball? It meant an end to segregation in Major League Baseball. Because before Robinson, black players were banned from Major League Baseball and played in separate leagues, most notably the Negro Leagues. So before Jackie Robinson broke that barrier of 1947, baseball was exclusive to a certain group of people. And so his signing in 1947 with the Dodgers, it ended more than 50 years of segregation within the sport. And that is a huge leap, because what did it do? It opened doors for generations of talented players to come in. And his success proved that black players could thrive in Major League Baseball. And it led to the recruitment of other players, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, and so many wonderful baseball players that had been denied access to Major League Baseball. And now with him opening up the color barrier and breaking that color barrier, you had so many talented players that were now elevating the level of play. They diversified the teams, and now you have this global reach of the game. You have Latin American players, Asian players, Latin American players such as Roberto Clemente with the Pirates. You'll see every once in a while somebody wearing a Roberto Clemente jersey. He unfortunately passed away in a terrible accident in a plane crash years ago, but people still look at him as breaking another barrier where now you're having Latin American players join teams. And what does this mean for American history and our society. Robinson integrating baseball 7 years before Brown versus the Board of Education ruling in 1954, 8 years before Rosa Parks' bus protest, and 17 years before the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So you can look at baseball and the integration of Jackie Robinson into baseball as a catalyst for the civil rights movement. And it showed that integration was possible. It can be peaceful, it can be beneficial, and it set a precedent for the rest of American society. So when we go back to that reference question and we look at that, baseball is more than just a sport, more than just a game. It has served as a catalyst for movements within civil rights, the integration and bringing together of different people. And in the post-integration era, now you have more diverse players beginning to dominate the World Series in baseball. And again, challenging those stereotypes and increasing representation amongst different cultures, different backgrounds, different experiences. So baseball becomes this site for multicultural influence. And it's visible within the postseason World Series, where you have Asian players, where you have these Latin American players, and players from all around coming together for that common goal of winning the World Series. So when we look at baseball, it is more than just a sport, and it is served as more than just a sport. Because as we move forward, now we needed baseball more than ever. When it came to the national healing post 9/11. So we're going to go to a music break real quick, and then we'll come back and take a look at 2001 and the World Series that inspired us, helped us get out of our funk, and brought us a peace that we had been neglecting for a while. You're listening to Library Talk and everything else, and thank you so very much for being here and allowing us to be part of your Thursday morning. We're going to go to a music break, and we'll come back, and we'll take a look at the rest of this conversation, which I love sharing with you. Thank you so very much, everybody. Thank you so much, everybody, for continuing to be with us on the show, Library Talk and everything else. I'm your host, DJJC. On September 11th, 2001, the world irrevocably changed. And played after these attacks, the Yankees versus the Diamondbacks, we saw that it was okay for us to start enjoying life a little bit more. It was okay for us to tune into television and watch baseball. And I remember watching that first game of the series with the Yankees and Diamondbacks for that 2001 World Series. And I remember President George Bush threw out the first pitch at the Yankee Stadium. And it just became such an iconic, patriotic moment. He stood up there on the mound, telling the world, we're united. Bring it on. It's time for us to start healing. And baseball served as an escape and this emotional healing, and it reinforced its place in the American cultural life. And I want to read an article to you, and this is another article from Nine, a Journal of Baseball History and Culture, Volume 12, Issue Number 1, Fall of 2003. And this is from University of Nebraska Press. And this is an article by Rebecca Krause, and I'm going to read a quote to you from that. So let me just get this settled in here. While our hearts and minds are still on the victims and their families, we believe it is important for our country to return to normal activity as soon as reasonably prudent. This is a strong and resilient country, and while these despicable acts affect us all, we will not allow such acts to bring such a great country to a standstill. Based on local security and transportation issues, each league will make its own judgment regarding resumption of gameplay beginning Friday. So this article is about baseball returning to gameplay. And so that Tuesday, September 11th, by Friday, they were already looking at bringing baseball back. It was important. And like this author mentions, it was a time for us to realize, hey, we're down, but we're not out. So baseball has served as a healing mechanism for us as well. But then we shift a little bit. And now we want to look at the globalization and social change in the modern era, which we have touched on because baseball has changed. I mentioned this at the very beginning. It's a slower game, but it has made some improvements recently to speed up its pace. It now has instant replay like football does. Now the umpires tell you if there's a discrepancy in a play or things like that. So they're changing their pace. But let's look at the identity and social change because, again, we see this increase of influence with Latin American, Asian, and international players. And the World Series is a global spectacle, and it does reflect America's cultural identity and their exports. And I want to go back to a topic that I talked about earlier about Latin American players. I have an uncle. His name's Mario. Great, great person. He's from Mexico. He has no connection to the Los Angeles Dodgers. He's never been to Los Angeles, never been to California. But he continues to follow the team, and he's really excited right now that the Dodgers are in the World Series. So one day, my brother asked him, Mario, why are you so into the Dodgers? And he had one answer. Fernando Valenzuela. Fernando Valenzuela. So we're going to take a look at that. We're going to take a look at Fernando Valenzuela, who changed the face of Los Angeles baseball. But there's a deeper meaning and a deeper reason why Fernando Valenzuela is so popular and what he did for the city of Los Angeles and for the Dodgers. So, nicknamed El Toro, Fernando Valenzuela was a Mexican professional baseball pitcher. He played 17 major league seasons from 1980 to 1997. He was born in a small town in Sonora, Mexico, and he became a professional player for the Los Angeles Dodgers in 1980. He enjoyed one of the hottest starts to a career in Major League Baseball. He went 8-0. In his rookie season, he went 8-0. And his rise to stardom in 1981 is known as Fernando Mania. And it gave Mexican Americans and Latinos a hero who looked like them, who spoke like them. And his humble beginnings in Sonora, Mexico, people could relate to. They could relate to his appearance. And he is an icon. He's an icon of possibility and resilience. He came into the league knowing very little English and not looking like a traditional baseball player. But with those 8-0 starts, he just captivated Los Angeles and he captivated baseball. He is the recipient of so many different awards, and he brought Mexican Americans back into baseball. And here's why. And I'm going to look at this, and we're going to explore this a little bit in depth. Because prior to Fernando Valenzuela joining the Dodgers in 1980, the Mexican American community in Los Angeles had given up on the Dodgers, and it wasn't even their fault. Because decades before Valenzuela's debut, Mexican families were displaced from Chavez Ravine, which is where the Dodgers Stadium now stands. And it created this resentment towards the team. The team had nothing to do with it, but there was this resentment against the Dodgers. So Valenzuela's success helped heal the wound by reconnecting the community with the Dodgers. So let's take a look at this a little bit more. In the first half of the 20th century, Chavez Ravine, again, which is where the Dodger Stadium now stands, was a largely independent, semi rural Mexican American community. And this was in the suburbs of Los Angeles. And the area was split into three smaller neighborhoods. By 1851, Chavez Ravine was home to about 1,800 families. The residents of Chavez Ravine, were generally poor and relied on farming for income. Many of the families living in Chavez Ravine by the 1950s moved there because ethnic housing discrimination within the city of Los Angeles forced them to go towards that area. They had their own church, they had their own school, they had their own form of government. But by 1951, Chavez Ravine was slated for redevelopment under the National Housing Act of 1949. And this was an act which provided federal money to build public housing. The Los Angeles Housing Authority began acquiring the land in the Chavez Ravine in 1951, through voluntary purchases, and the exercise of eminent domain, which means that for the good and the betterment of the city, we are going to take over this land. So between 1952 and 1953, much of the land that had been sold had been cleared away, but there were still some people that were holding out. And the public housing project ended up being canceled. So that land was sitting there. And all of a sudden, the Brooklyn Dodgers from New York, they decide that they're going to move from New York and they're looking for a place to build a stadium in Los Angeles. And they saw Chavez Ravine as a wonderful point within the suburbs of Los Angeles to build. And they made a push for it. Los Angeles was very happy to give up their area, to give up that land, but the people of Chavez Ravine were not. They were forcefully removed from their remaining families and their homes. If you go back and watch YouTube videos, or you can find different documentaries, and some pictures, you see people being pulled out of their houses, physically being pulled out of their houses by Los Angeles police, removed. And thus begins the animosity against the Dodgers. And it lasted for several years. And before Fernando Valenzuela arrived, only about 5% of Dodger Stadium fans were Mexican American. Then after his debut, the number soared to 50%. And then more people started coming. And this became the Fernando Mania. And it became this place where you can go for cultural celebrations. Let me read a quote for you. It says, "For many, he was our Muhammad Ali, a figure who showed that Latinos could excel in mainstream American sports despite barriers." And this is from a news story from Channel 4 News, Los Angeles, entitled, "He Made Latinos Dream. LA's Chicano Community Remembers Fernando Valenzuela." October 23rd, 2024, a year ago. There's a wonderful documentary on YouTube entitled Fernando Mania. Fernando Valenzuela wasn't just a baseball player. He was this cultural phenomenon who just transformed the relationship between the Dodgers and the Hispanic community. He inspired pride, and he created lasting social change. He became a role model for young Latinos, proving that success was possible regardless of any language barrier, socioeconomic status, and parents encouraged their children to embrace their identity, even celebrating traits like the left-handedness that he brought. He passed away in 2024, but his legacy continues through programs like Amigos de Fernando, a Major League Baseball youth outreach initiative promoting baseball in inner-city communities. There is even a reference to him in the movie Rain Man with Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman. He transcended cultures. He showed that regardless of the barriers, regardless of the status, regardless of the language, he could be successful. And so many people looked up to him, and that's the reason my uncle became a Dodgers fan, because of Fernando Valenzuela. And he continues to support the Dodgers. Now, I mentioned this earlier that it's really hard for me to sit through an entire baseball game. I've tried it. I have sat down with my brother in law and we watched the entire last game of the World Series when the Cubs won the World Series. And I'll mention the Cubs in a little bit. He and I sat through the entire game because we wanted to be there when the Cubs won if they were going to win that one game. But as far as a general baseball game, I have not really sat down through an entire baseball game, but my uncle Mario, he can sit through any Dodger game from the first inning to the ninth. So as we move into the next part of our conversation, and I really love where this is going, we're going to take a look at baseball facts and stats and my connection, which again is very tenuous to baseball and the World Series. So please continue to join us for the rest of this conversation. We really appreciate you being here. You're listening to Library Talk and everything else only on Vaquero Radio, the Valley's student station. Good morning, everybody. As we begin to wrap up the episode on baseball today, a little bit of Michael Jackson, who is the king of pop, and the rey de los mariachis, Vicente Fernandez. I know that's probably not a combination that you hear many radio stations playing those back to back, but I just thought it was appropriate. Thank you so much again for making us part of your Thursday morning. So I'm going to go into some facts about the World Series and again, a little bit of a personal connection to baseball. So most World Series titles, that goes to the New York Yankees with 27. Most World Series appearances also with the New York Yankees at 41. Longest World Series game, 7 hours and 20 minutes, game 3 of the 2018 World Series. The one year that there was no World Series, 1994, due to a player strike. The American League has seen more World Series wins than the National League. The Chicago Cubs have gone 106 years without winning a World Series title. They finally did a couple of years back. The Toronto Blue Jays became the first non-U.S. team to win the World Series in 1992 and the only team to have never won a World Series, the Seattle Mariners. Some interesting facts about baseball and the World Series. I want to go back to the research question real quick because I feel that this week we did answer it and we took a look at the different aspects of how the World Series and how baseball itself has been instrumental in various parts of society, culture, the catalyst for the civil rights movement, and something that we needed during the September 11th and it's changing the world pretty much. It was a time for us to come together. It was a time for us to realize that it was okay to begin to enjoy life again, and baseball served its purpose. As we watch the World Series and as you follow the World Series this year, please note the different names that are going to be on the jerseys of various players. And you have such a multi and such a diverse community within these baseball teams. And again, all of them vying for a World Series title. So baseball has served as more than just a game and as a sport. If you enjoy baseball and you like the Dodgers or the Toronto Blue Jays, you're up for a wonderful World Series. If you were a casual watcher of baseball like myself, I'm going to be tuning in to some of the games. And again, baseball is an acquired taste. Now, it is a very, and I talked about this earlier at length, a very elegant sport. You see a lot of kids, little kids, boys and girls, playing Little League. And as they progress, they move on to Pony League and then into school baseball. Seeing baseball in person is very different, and watching a game in person is very different from watching it on television. So I invite you to watch the World Series. I invite you to continue listening to this show. I want to thank Ariana and all her staff for making every show possible and helping us with setting up for every episode of this show. If you're interested in this conversation and want to hear more from this show and all the other wonderfully produced shows that are done through Vaquero Radio, go to the YouTube Vaquero channel and you'll see past episodes of this series as well as some of the other shows that are produced here at UTRGV. I'm going to finish with this. My brother and my father, both outstanding baseball umpires. And I tried my hand at it. My brother invited me to go with him to a meeting to become a baseball umpire. And I've talked about this in another episode where we talked about officiating. So I tried to get into it, but I couldn't get past the first day of training. My brother continued, and like I said, he is an excellent umpire. My nephew is very talented, and you can tell when somebody has the gift for sports and that athleticism. And he's a baseball catcher, and my brother is his coach. So my brother is not only a wonderful umpire, knows the rules, but also serves as his coach, which is great. My father, again, a wonderful baseball umpire. And I remember going to all his games. And I remember listening to the crowds boo him and cheer him. But he was an outstanding and excellent umpire. On a personal level, and a very tenuous connection to baseball's World Series. 50 years ago, around this time, the Boston Red Sox and the Cincinnati Reds were in the World Series. And I mention this because my mom was pregnant with me at the time. My father was in the military, and we were stationed in Fort Polk, Louisiana. Not much to do there. Even today, there's not much to do there. So they didn't know very many people. So every night, they would watch the World Series. And they would watch it on this black and white 10-inch television. And this was right before I was born on the 2nd of November. So every year during the World Series, it always comes back, and my mom tells us a story of how her and my dad would sit every night and watch the World Series right before I was born. So again, a very tenuous connection. The Cincinnati Reds would end up winning that series 4-3. I want to wish everybody a wonderful weekend. I want to wish everybody a wonderful week. To my Uncle Mario, good luck to your Dodgers. I am dedicating this episode to you, Theo. And good luck to your Dodgers. But I want to wish everybody a wonderful week. We are going to be talking about horror films and horror television next week as we go into Halloween. So I'm really looking forward to that episode. We're going to be having one of our colleagues join me in the show, one of our librarians from Edinburgh. So I want to thank you for listening to this episode of Library Talk and everything else. I want to wish you all the best. Stay safe, be kind to each other, be good to each other, and we'll see you next time on Library Talk and everything else, only on Vaquero Radio, the Valley's student station.